Seated across from my son, I felt a rare peace. IT was supposed to be a simple dinner, a moment to bridge the distance between US. But then my phone buzzed. One text changed everything. Get up. Leave now. Don't say anything to your son. My hands trembled as I read the words. Who sent this? Why would they warn me? And most importantly, what secret was hiding right in front of me at that table? Asterisk, the restaurant was quieter than usual, its low hum of conversation blending with the faint clinking of glasses. Warm golden lights hung above each table, creating soft pools of brightness across the room. I shifted in my seat, smoothing the crease in my shirt. It wasn't often that I got to sit across from my son like this. Months had gone by since we had shared a meal together, and the silence between us felt both comforting and fragile. I watched him studying the menu, his brows furrowed slightly, the same way they had when he was a child concentrating on homework. That small detail made something stir in my chest. Despite the years that had built distance between us, he was still my boy. The waiter appeared and took our orders, leaving behind 2 glasses of water that caught the light and shimmered like crystals. I lifted mine slowly, partly to hide the tremor in my hand. For me, this dinner wasn't just a meal, it was an opportunity. An attempt to bridge the unspoken gap that had grown wider each year. The last few times we had spoken had ended in short words and unfinished thoughts, like bridges that never reached the other side. Tonight, I wanted things to be different. I wanted to laugh with him, to feel once again the bond we used to share. The silence, however, pressed heavier with every passing second. Then, he finally looked up, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's good to see you, Dad," he said softly. His voice carried a mix of sincerity and distance, like a man caught between duty and affection. I nodded, fighting the urge to say more than I should. For now, I told myself, it was enough. A quiet dinner. A fresh start. Just father and son, seated together, unaware that this night would change everything. Asterisk, the meal began slowly, almost cautiously, as though both of us were testing the waters of conversation. My son commented on the weather, the traffic, even the quality of the restaurant's bread. His words were polite but guarded, a shield against something deeper. I smiled and nodded, playing along, though every sentence left me hungrier for honesty. Beneath his careful tone, I could sense the hesitation that lingered like smoke in the air. I wanted to ask about his life, about his work, his wife, and the home they were building together. But every time I opened my mouth, my courage faltered. It wasn't that I didn't know what to say. It was that I feared the truth of his answers. Would he tell me things I longed to hear, or would his words confirm the distance I already felt? A father's heart is strong, but fragile in silence. The waiter returned, setting down steaming plates that filled the air with rich, savory aromas. My son picked up his fork, thanked the waiter politely, and dug in. I followed, chewing slowly. But I couldn't focus on the flavors. My mind circled the same thoughts like a bird trapped in a cage. Should I say something meaningful? Should I tell him how much I missed him? Or should I let the evening unfold naturally and hope for the best? Across the table, he glanced at his phone for just a second before placing it face down beside his plate. A flicker of unease passed through me, but I brushed it aside. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was nothing. I leaned back in my chair, drawing in a quiet breath, telling myself there would be time. I didn't know then that time was slipping through. My hands faster than I could hold it. Asterisk halfway through dinner, when laughter had only begun to feel possible, his phone buzzed again. The sound was soft, but in the quiet restaurant, it seemed to echo louder than it should have. My son didn't notice at first. He was mid-sentence, telling me about a project at work. But I did. I noticed the faint glow that lit up the screen. My heart skipped, though I couldn't say why. When he finally reached for the phone, he hesitated. His fingers brushed against it, then stopped. Instead of flipping it over, he pushed it slightly away, closer to the edge of the table. I didn't think much of it, at least, not then. But the screen flickered once more, this time brighter, and I caught a glimpse of a notification before it disappeared. Words. Urgent words. Words that weren't meant for me to see. I tried to focus on him, on his smile as he explained the ins and outs of his busy days. But my mind was no longer on the conversation. My chest tightened with a strange unease, as though the evening had shifted without warning. That phone, sitting there so still, seemed louder than the clinking of cutlery and the murmurs of other diners. My instincts whispered that something was off. Very off, Doc, then it happened. Another buzz, sharper this time, and my eyes fell on the screen before he could turn it away. A short message, glowing like a warning flare. Get up. Leave now. Don't say anything to your son. My fork froze midder. My pulse thundered in my ears. I forced myself to sit still, my lips pressed tight, praying he hadn't noticed my glance. I had no idea who sent that message, or why, but I knew in that moment everything had changed. I sat there frozen, my eyes fixed on the glowing screen as the message burned into my mind. Leave now. Don't say anything. Every word felt like a thunderclap inside my chest. I wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but I couldn't. My son sat across from me, completely unaware, cutting into his meal with ease. My mouth went dry, and yet I forced a smile, trying to keep my hands from trembling. The world around me seemed to blur. Plates clinked, glasses clattered, people laughed, yet it all sounded distant like echoes from another place. My mind raced with possibilities. Who would send me such a message? Why was I supposed to leave? And most haunting of all, why must I not say anything to my son? I tried to think rationally, but fear slithered into every corner of my thoughts. I reached for my water glass, pretending to sip, but in truth, I was buying myself time. My son kept talking, oblivious, his words blending together into noise I couldn't process. I glanced at the phone again, half expecting another vibration, another command. Nothing came. Only that last message, glaring in my memory. The urgency. In those words left no room for hesitation, yet I was rooted to the chair like stone. I forced myself to breathe, steady but shallow, while every instinct screamed at me to stand up. The restaurant, moments ago warm and inviting, now felt like a trap. Every face I saw could be watching. Every shadow in the corner could be hiding something. I knew one wrong move could change everything. I had to decide, obey the message without question, or risk staying, not knowing the danger that lurked just beyond my son's smile. I stared at my son, his eyes lighting up as he shared something about work, but I barely caught the words. My heart thudded against my ribs like a drum, drowning out his voice. Inside me, two voices battled. One screamed, "Get up, leave now, save yourself." The other whispered, "Stay, don't make a scene. What if it's all a mistake?" My body sat perfectly still, yet my mind was a storm of chaos. I glanced around the restaurant, trying to stay discreet. A couple near the window laughed, a family tended to their children. A waiter passed by balancing a tray. Everything looked normal, painfully normal. But that message couldn't be ignored. My fingers traced the phone in my lap, itching for another text, something to explain. Nothing. The silence after that command felt heavier than the words themselves. I forced myself to nod and laugh faintly at something my son said. My mask had to hold. If he suspected anything, it could ruin everything or worse, put him in danger. But then another thought cut through me like glass. What if the warning is about him? The idea chilled me to the core. My son, the boy I raised, the man sitting before me, could he somehow be part of whatever threat lingered unseen? I hated myself for even thinking it, yet fear makes monsters out of shadows. I pressed my palms against my knees under the table, steadying myself. Leaving quietly without a word felt impossible. And yet, staying seated felt like waiting for a storm to swallow me. My eyes caught the reflection in the polished silverware, my own face pale and strained, hiding panic behind. A fragile smile. The war inside me was reaching its breaking point. I knew I had only moments before I had to choose run or risk everything. Asterisk. The clink of silverware and hum of chatter filled the restaurant, but none of it reached me fully. My gaze darted subtly around, searching for anything that would explain the warning. Then, at the edge of the dining floor, I noticed him. A man in a dark coat sat alone, his face half hidden by the low light. He wasn't eating, wasn't talking. He was watching. Watching me. I swallowed hard, shifting in my chair as my son continued his story, oblivious to the storm swirling inside me. The man's eyes never wavered. Each time I tried to look away, I felt his stare burning into the side of my face. I pretended to reach for my glass of water, my movements steady, but my hand trembled against the cold rim. Had he sent the text? Or was he the reason behind it? The seconds stretched endlessly, every tick of the clock amplifying my dread. A bead of sweat slid down my back, despite the air-conditioned chill. My son leaned closer, smiling warmly, and for a fleeting moment, I almost convinced myself it was all in my head. But then the man shifted, sliding something small from his coat pocket onto the table. My stomach twisted. It was too quick to recognize, but not quick enough to dismiss. I forced a laugh at something my son said, though my voice cracked under the weight of fear. I gripped my napkin tightly, pressing it against my lap like a lifeline. The warning replayed, in my head with crushing urgency. Get up. Leave now. My heart pounded louder with every glance at the stranger. This was no accident, no coincidence. Something was happening here tonight, and I was sitting in the middle of it. Asterisk, I leaned back slightly, forcing my face into a calm mask while every nerve inside me screamed. My son's laughter rang across the table, innocent and untroubled, but I couldn't join him. My eyes flickered toward the stranger again. He hadn't moved much, yet his presence pressed on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Each second felt like borrowed time, as though I sat in a play where everyone knew the script except me. I reached for my phone under the table, careful to keep it hidden from my son's curious eyes. The message glared back at me like a siren. Get up. Leave now. Don't say anything. My thumb hovered, desperate to reply, but another thought seized me. What if they were watching for that? What if even the smallest move exposed me? I locked the screen again, sliding the phone back down, my pulse hammering so hard it rattled my chest. The waiter returned to pour more water, and for a fleeting moment, the ordinary bustle of the restaurant shielded me. Clinking glasses, sizzling platters, soft music, it all felt like a cruel illusion, a backdrop to a reality only I seemed to notice. I smiled tightly at the server, nodding, but the stranger's gaze never faltered. He scribbled something on a small notepad and tucked it away quickly. My stomach churned. I wanted to ask my son to leave, to invent an excuse, but the warning restrained me. If danger truly lurked in the shadows, dragging him into it could be disastrous. So I sat there, trapped in my own silence, every instinct shouting at me to run. The text wasn't a suggestion, it was a lifeline. And yet, leaving without a word felt impossible. Asterisk, the stranger finally shifted. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that cut through the hum of the restaurant. My fork froze midway to my mouth. He didn't look around, didn't acknowledge anyone, just adjusted his coat and began walking toward the back. Yet every step seemed deliberate, like he was dragging a shadow of menace with him. I tried to breathe steadily, but the air caught in my throat. My son noticed nothing. He leaned forward, recounting a story from work, his smile wide, his hands animated. I nodded along, my responses mechanical, my ears tuned not to his words, but to the measured footsteps fading behind us. Then, just as I allowed myself to believe, the moment had passed, my phone buzzed again against my thigh. My heart lurched. Another text, sharp and urgent. He's checking the exits. Do not let him see you leave. Wait for my signal. The room spun. My hand gripped the edge of the table. To anchor myself, forcing my features to remain calm. Who was sending these warnings? How did they know what was unfolding around me? My eyes darted discreetly across the restaurant. Families laughed, couples whispered, waiters weaved between tables. And yet, beneath this curtain of normalcy, something darker moved just out of sight. I sipped my water, pretending to listen, while inside I was unraveling. The stranger had vanished into the back, leaving a trail of questions clawing at my mind. Was he truly dangerous, or was this some cruel trick? I had no answers, only a gnawing certainty that the longer I sat here, the closer I came to a moment I could never undo. The warning pulsed in my pocket like a heartbeat. Wait for my signal. My son excused himself briefly to take a call outside, leaving me alone at the table. The moment he stepped away, the air shifted. I felt it before I saw. At the hush that seemed to press against my ears, the subtle flicker of shadows along the wall. My phone vibrated again, and this time I didn't hesitate. I slid it under the table, heart hammering, and read the words. Now, get up, head to the kitchen door. Do not look back. My pulse thundered in my ears. The kitchen door? I'd eaten here. Before noon, it led through the staff hallway and out into the rear alley. Why that way? My mind raced with questions, but instinct screamed louder than logic. Whoever was guiding me had seen something I hadn't, and hesitation could cost me dearly. My hands trembled as I folded my napkin neatly, forcing normalcy into my movements. I rose slowly, every muscle taut with fear. The clink of glasses, bursts of laughter, and soft music filled the space around me. Yet each sound felt warped, distant, like I was moving through water. I took one step, then another, toward the swinging kitchen door. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the faint reflection in the restaurant mirror. The stranger had returned. He was watching. His eyes locked onto me, unblinking, calculating. My throat went dry, but I didn't falter. I pressed forward. As I reached for the kitchen door handle, my phone buzzed again. Don't stop. Push through. Trust me. My breath hitched, but I obeyed. The door swung open, releasing a burst of heat and the clang of pans. I slipped inside, my chest tight with dread, knowing one thing for certain. My world was no longer safe. Someone had marked me, and escape was only the beginning. The heat of the kitchen struck me like a wave, frying oil and steam clouding the air. Chefs barked orders, knives clattered, flames flared from skillets. None of them paid me any attention as I slipped along the wall, my breath shallow and controlled. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, but I didn't dare check it. All I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat, pounding like a drum of warning. Moved past trays of food, dodging servers rushing out the opposite door. My shoes squeaked faintly on the tiled floor, and every sound felt like an alarm bell. I kept my eyes on the narrow hallway, ahead the one that led to the rear alley. Yet, dread coiled in my chest. If the message had warned me, then danger wasn't behind me anymore. It was waiting ahead. I could feel it, a predator's presence just beyond the door. The closer I drew, the heavier my body felt, as though gravity itself wanted to keep me from reaching safety. My hand trembled as I reached for the bar of the exit door. For a moment, I considered turning back, running into the noisy dining room, confessing everything to my son. But the words of the message echoed in my mind. Don't say anything. Trust me. It was the silence that might save me or destroy me. I pushed the door open. Cold night air swept across my face, sharp and biting, a cruel contrast to the kitchen's suffocating heat. The alley stretched long and dim, lit only by a flickering street lamp at the far end. My legs moved before my mind could argue. I stepped out, pulling the door shut softly behind me. Then, just as relief teased at the edges of my chest, a shadow peeled itself from the wall. Someone was already waiting. Asterisk, the figure stepped forward, pulling free from the shadows with deliberate calm. My breath hitched, and for an instant, my legs refused to move. The dim street lamp flickered above us, throwing their face in and out of clarity. A tall man dressed in dark clothes, his features sharp and unreadable. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence was heavier than any words. Every instinct in me screamed that this was the danger my phone had warned about. I forced myself to take a step back, my hand clutching the cool brick wall for support. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound. "Steady." He tilted his head slightly, studying me as if I were a puzzle he'd already solved. Then he smiled, and it wasn't the smile of a stranger. It was a smile of recognition, chilling in its certainty. My stomach dropped. He knew me. Somehow, this wasn't random. The sound of the kitchen door creaking open behind me jolted my senses. A server stepped into the alley, cigarette in hand, oblivious to the tension that charged the air. The man froze, his eyes narrowing, before retreating a single step into the dark. The server lit up, glanced at us briefly, and disappeared back inside without a word. I wished he'd stayed, wished he'd noticed something, anything. But the door shut, sealing me in with the stranger once more. Then he finally spoke, his voice low and unsettling. "You shouldn't have come here tonight." My chest tightened as the words sank in, thick with hidden meaning. He wasn't just talking about dinner. He knew more too much. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, a vibration that felt like salvation. But I didn't dare reach for it. His eyes followed my every twitch. And in that suffocating silence, I realized one horrifying truth. I wasn't meant to leave this alley alive. The man stepped closer, his shoes scraping against the wet pavement, and every sound seemed to echo in the tight alley. My back pressed harder against the wall, my palms damp with sweat. His eyes locked on mine, cold and determined, as if every move he made was already decided. I felt trapped, like prey cornered by a predator, the night closing in around us with no escape. My heart pounded so loud, I was sure he could hear it. Why me? I forced the words out, though my throat felt tight. His expression didn't change, but his silence was more terrifying than any answer. He reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, and in that moment, I saw something metallic glint under the dim light. A knife. My breath caught, my legs trembling. The warning on my phone wasn't just paranoia. It was real, and it was standing inches away from me, ready to strike. I glanced toward the street, but it felt impossibly far, the world beyond the alley muffled and distant. The man's grip tightened on the handle, and for a split second, I thought it was over. Then, just as he raised his arm, a sudden shout echoed from the other end of the alley. "Hey, leave her alone." The voice was sharp, commanding, and it shattered the deadly silence like glass breaking. My attacker froze, his head snapping toward the interruption. Two figures appeared in the distance, their footsteps quick and purposeful. The stranger cursed under his breath and stepped back, the knife disappearing into his coat as quickly as it had appeared. His gaze returned to me, burning with unfinished business, before he melted back into the shadows with eerie speed. I staggered forward, gasping for air, my legs weak with relief and terror. Whoever those voices belonged to, they had saved me. But I knew deep down this wasn't over. Asterisk as the two figures drew closer, the dim glow from a distant streetlight revealed their faces. My breath caught again not strangers, but two men I recognized from the neighborhood. Retired officers who had always walked with quiet confidence, often seen keeping an informal eye on the community. I had nodded at them countless times in passing, never realizing they might one day step in to save me. One of them, tall with a stern expression, placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice carrying both authority and concern. I nodded quickly, though my chest still rose and fell with uneven breaths. The other man scanned the alley, his eyes sharp, as though making sure the danger had truly vanished. For a moment, the silence between us was heavy, filled only by the lingering echo of what almost happened. "You shouldn't be out here alone," the taller one continued, his tone softening. "That man wasn't just wandering. He was waiting." His words sent a shiver through me, confirming the fear that had already rooted deep in my chest. My mind replayed the flash of the knife, the cold stare, and the way he disappeared so quickly, as if he knew these streets better than anyone else. The warning text on my phone replayed in my mind, raising even more questions. Who had sent it? How had they known? I wanted to thank them, to find words strong enough to carry the weight of my gratitude, but all I managed was a shaky, "If you hadn't come." The shorter man cut me off gently, a faint smile breaking his otherwise serious face. "You're safe. That's what matters." Yet even as he said it, I noticed the way his hand hovered near his side, tense, alert. Safe was a fragile word, one that could vanish as quickly as the shadows that had swallowed my attacker. Asterisk, when I finally gathered myself enough to look down at my phone again, the words glowed brighter than ever. "Get up. Leave now. Don't say anything to your son." My fingers trembled as I clutched it tighter, replaying the moment over and over in my mind. Whoever sent this message knew exactly what was about to happen, almost as if they had been standing in the shadows, watching both me and him. The retired officer glanced at the phone when he noticed how pale I had become. "What's that?" he asked quietly. Reluctantly, I tilted the screen toward him. His brows furrowed immediately, and he exchanged a sharp look with his partner. "This isn't random," he muttered. "Somebody wanted you to survive tonight, and somebody else wanted the opposite." The weight of his words pressed into me, heavier than the night air. This was no coincidence. It was something bigger. God, 1,000 questions crowded my head. Who would care enough to warn me? Why couldn't they come forward in person? And worse, what kind of connection did my son have in all of this? The warning had been very clear. Don't say anything to him. That meant he wasn't just an innocent bystander. The thought broke me from the inside out, tearing at every bond I had ever believed was unshakable. The officers suggested I go home under their escort, but even as I nodded, I knew my life had shifted. I wasn't just walking away from an attack. I was walking into a mystery that had wrapped itself around my family. My son's face flashed in my mind, the warmth of his smile, the years of love and laughter. Could it all have been a mask hiding secrets I wasn't ready to uncover? The phone buzzed in my hand again, pulling me out of the spiral. Another message had arrived. Asterisk. The second message lit up the screen with chilling finality. "He is not who you think he is. Trust nitrogen monoxide 1 tonight." My breath caught as I stared. At the words, my chest tightening. Every ounce of denial, I had clung to began to crumble. My son, my own flesh and blood, was tangled in something dark, something I couldn't yet fully grasp. Tears blurred my vision, not just from fear, but from heartbreak. The officer leaned closer, reading the message over my shoulder, his jaw clenched. "This is bigger than a family argument," he said firmly. "Someone close to you wanted to save you, and someone else wanted you silenced." His words echoed inside me like thunder. I wanted to scream, to demand answers from my son, but the warning gnawed at me. Don't say anything to him. I realized then that silence was my only protection. As they escorted me to their patrol car, the neighborhood seemed different, darker, sharper, as though every shadow held a secret. I glanced back at the house, wondering how many truths had been buried behind those walls. My son had always been my pride, my reason to keep moving forward, but now I couldn't ignore the possibility that he had been hiding a double life. All along, the ache in my heart was unbearable, but so was the urge to uncover the truth. I slid into the back seat, clutching the phone like a lifeline, when the officer turned to me. "Ma'am, whoever sent you those texts just saved your life. But if you want answers, you'll have to be ready for what they reveal." At that moment, I knew this was no ending, only the beginning of a journey that would test every ounce of strength, love, and trust I had left.